Well, hello, hello, hello to everybody here. It's Teresa Sanderson, and I am so excited to welcome you to this episode of Igniting Impact, Influence, and Income. And this is the interview series that we use to expose you to new methods of communication that are designed to help you increase your influence, your impact, and your income through using a tool that I have grown to love called the Bank Methodology and Codebreaker AI. We have with us a special guest today. This is Dr. Eric Goodman. And Eric, I just want to welcome you and thank you for sharing some time with us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And like you, this is one of those tools that I'm very fond of as well. So
Love, love, love it. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know Dr. Goodman, I just want to share with you a little bit of his bio. He has more than 25 years of broad experience as a results-oriented leader, consultant, and trainer in corporate and higher education settings. He's a visionary innovator with a strong track record of success in creating effective cultures. Boy, that's near and dear to my heart. Accelerating performance and creating a sustainable competitive advantage. He's been involved with custom corporate programs and worked with a variety of Fortune 500 organizations. He's a former professor with many years of experience in higher level education, C-suite, and another decade as a business school dean, including leading one of the nation's largest college of business. And so he brings information, strategies, and systems and best practices based on research to his clients. Eric serves as a catalyst for positive growth and transformation in the lives that he touches, and has helped numerous organizations discover, leverage, and maximize their potential. Welcome again, Eric. It's a pleasure to have you here.
thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and to bring this powerful technology, or at least an awareness of it, to others in terms of how it can really catapult your influence and your communication skills so that you can have a greater impact.
Love, love, love it. So, we've reviewed a little bit of your bio, but
Uh-huh.
I would love, my audience typically is nurse entrepreneurs, but within that audience, I have a lot of doctorate prepared nurses. I have nurses who are working
Okay.
in academia. We have traditional nurses, and we've got a bunch of nurses who have hung out their own shingle. Tell us a little bit so that we can get to know you better. Tell us a little bit about your background and, the kind of work that you're doing now.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
So, I guess based on the audience, I'll share a little bit of background that's relevant to
sure.
that particular context, particularly in the academic realm. But before that, I do that. I'll share with you a little bit because growing up, I was always fascinated with performance and high performers and what differentiated those individuals or those organizations that did well versus others that didn't do so well. And my dad grew up in the south side of Chicago in the projects. He never went to college, but instilled within me a value of education and the importance of that. And so after going out into the corporate world, I found that doing training and development and that type of work that I really wanted to continue to learn. So I went back and got my master's degree. Ultimately, I got my PhD in business from CU Boulder and found myself not going back to the corporate world, but really falling in love with the ability to train not just students, but executives in different programs that we were offering. And so specifically, I was teaching in the area of change management, strategy, organizational behavior, leadership, those types of things. And so ultimately, as you shared in my bio, I'm committed to helping empower others to discover, leverage, and maximize their potential so they can become the best version of themselves, and
Mm.
really love creating confident leaders who I can help inspire to embrace their unique gifts so that together we can have an impact in the world. And that's been a common theme as I've worked in the education space, and particularly having led doctoral programs at universities to actually over a decade ago with working at a university where I introduced a master's in integrated health systems management, where I had the former Secretary of Health and Human Services for the US, Chief Academic Officer for the Mayo and Cleveland Clinic, a lot of
Wow.
high-powered individuals looking at healthcare and telehealth. And interestingly, the person who led the development of the pandemic plan for H1N1 was on
Oh,
my,
wow.
and who would have known we experienced what we experienced with COVID, of course,
Yeah.
but we were sort of on the forefront a decade ago, and we actually had a course on pandemic planning and things like that, which was really cool. And to see people that have gone through that program since that are now like CEOs of hospital systems and things like that. I actually did my dissertation on burnout among emergency medical physicians. I
Oh
work
my.
closely with ASAP. People are familiar with that organization. And I've had the opportunity, with that to work in healthcare over the years. I did consulting work going back 30 years ago with quality of work life and hospital systems, mergers and acquisitions, and really building strong teams, leadership teams in hospitals to improve the quality of work life in those organizations. And I published in a variety of areas related to, you mentioned culture, that I think that
Mhm.
got you excited a little bit. But when you look at hospital culture, quality of work life, burnout, team building,
Yeah.
all those types of things, and mentoring in the healthcare environment. And so whether it's in the annals of emergency medicine to Journal of Healthcare Management, things like that, looking at different aspects of it. But ultimately, what I'm doing now is a variety of things where I still do a lot of what I would consider, when I'm helping people discover and leverage their potential, it's helping them go from where they are to where they want to be
Mm.
and create the impact, the life that they desire so that they're empowered to actually have influence. And so often people fall into a particular profession and they're just stuck in the daily grind and never step back to really look at, like, is this, is this the life I'm meant to be living? What are my
Yes.
unique gifts and qualities? And I pull that out of organizations as well to help them differentiate themselves from the competition to better serve whoever they're serving in life. But ultimately, when I look at this, what I'm doing now, I love strategic planning, whether it's with individuals, life planning, if you will,
Yep.
designing that type of a system so they can be high performers as individuals or as organizations. And I offer a range of also training and consulting, of course, using the bank methodology for
Mhm.
organizations, applying it with leadership development and communication and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, doing things with healthcare organizations also to help them understand that in the context of patient care, because
Mhm.
we know, in terms of communication in healthcare, it hasn't changed a whole lot.
Mhm.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of traditional therapeutic communication systems that are still um, age old,
Yep.
and really understanding, how can you meet somebody where they're at. When I've had some firsthand experiences personally with my mother in particular, who spent about almost a year in and out of hospitals and changing hospitals and doing that.
Mm.
And I saw firsthand the burnout and
Yeah.
some of the
Yeah.
dissatisfaction and everything else. And obviously, having studied burnout very closely in a past life, it just sort of came back to remind me about, going back to Hippocrates. I mean, cure sometimes, treat often, and comfort always. Like, how can you do that if you do not understand your patient? And
Exactly.
even Sir William Osler, the good physician treats the disease. The
Mhm.
great physician or the great nurse treats the patient who has the disease.
Oh,
And you've got to
yes.
diagnose first before you prescribe, right?
Yep.
Hippocratic oath. And so understanding that, the average, let me ask you this question on average, since I'm getting in a little deeper than
Yep.
just my background, but
That's okay.
if you think about the typical physician or the typical encounter with the patient,
Yeah.
how long do you think it is before the doctor or the nurse interrupts the patient when they're coming in talking about their symptoms?
Oh my
Much,
gosh. Very, very
any guess?
quick. Yeah.
Very, very quick.
Yeah. Within a couple of minutes for sure. Yeah.
The average is 17 seconds.
Gee whiz.
And they're doing that because they think that, they got to save time. They're back to back, they
Yeah.
got schedules, they got patients and patients. And what they don't realize is if they just let that patient talk, typically that patient would be done talking within a minute.
Yeah.
Yet
Yeah.
they prolong it because they're not listening. They're not listening actively to really understand the patient. And that's where the communication skills really come into play. And when you look at this, if you're in a hospital system in particular, obviously Press Ganey and the
Mhm.
patient satisfaction scores, a lot of emphasis on that. And we know nationally, the levels of satisfaction are of course tied. Did the nurse or doctor listen to me?
Right.
Were they responsive? Did they, show empathy? Did they explain things
Exactly.
clearly? How you explain things needs to change based on who you're talking to,
Right.
right? We'll talk more
Mhm.
about that. But at any rate, that's a little bit of the context. So I love helping high performers, but again, I'm a recovering academic, I guess you could say, because as you shared with the in the intro, I've spent a lot of time in that environment, and it's
Yeah.
translating and bringing this to this powerful communication system and applying it in ways that weren't the original intent of the system, but it's about emotional intelligence. So,
My gosh,
right.
I just love it. So many golden nuggets in there, and so much of that that's very near and dear to my heart. I've launched the Nurses Feed Their Young movement that is all about, improving nursing culture in meaningful ways, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not anything that nurses have to wait for administration to finally say, hey, you've got our permission to do this thing. It's
Yeah.
very individually driven. It's driven by each individual
Mm-hmm.
nurse who may want to up level his or her own game just to come to the table with emotional intelligence and
Yeah.
decrease their own stress, while at the same time
Absolutely.
serving their coworkers, the patients, and everybody else on the team at a higher level. So love what you're hitting on there. And before we get into our discussion about the bank methodology, you also hit on, it was designed for a totally different purpose
Yeah.
than what you or I are using it for. And well, I mean, I use it for the I use it for the sales component. We probably both do. But
Yeah.
bank was originally designed as a method to increase income and sales up to 300%. And
Mm-hmm.
it is the only personality assessment tool that is scientifically validated to predict buying behavior in 90 seconds. When I heard that as a nurse entrepreneur struggling in the online space to sell my course offerings,
Mm-hmm.
action is my lowest code, but I signed up because I said,
That's great.
I need that
Yeah.
growth. I need that. And
Mm-hmm.
the cool thing is the bank methodology, while it started out as a sales tool,
Yeah.
what ended up happening, you and I know, is that people started coming out and saying, yeah, my income has increased, my sales are better, everything's going great with my business, but I'm also getting along better with my wife. I'm not going to get a divorce anymore. I can communicate with my children. It's just been crazy what has happened. And so that's where you and I have started to see, how can this be used in healthcare? How can it be used in other environments to have
Mm-hmm.
those same kind of results? So I want to ask you, my story of why I got in, but share with us, how and why you felt the need to implement bank into your own work.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And so actually, when I first learned about bank, it was when I was moving out of academics and
Okay.
somebody asked what I was doing, and I shared I was doing, doing consulting work, and they actually brought up, "Have you heard of this?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't." And it was amazing to me because I mean, there's hundreds, thousands of assessments out there. There's a lot of them.
Yes.
I had been using different personality assessments for decades in organizations, working with leaders, and even I've created several programs, masters of leadership programs at universities, working with executive programs as well to help them develop their emotional intelligence. And ironically, one of the universities I was at, we actually had a major in sales too. So I understood sales very well, and I had seen the application of some other systems or the attempted application of it, I should say, compared to what bank can do in the sales environment. So when someone said, have you heard of this? It's a reverse engineered personality system to design to predict buying behavior in less
Yeah.
than 90 seconds. My head exploded. I'm like, what? Like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Like, you know, it's like I had never connected the dots, but when I thought back about my own ability to be a change agent in other contexts, whether in healthcare or in higher education or in companies, and
Mhm.
empowering people to have influence, that is really the secret sauce. When I saw this system, and I actually, I heard about it, and I happened to be like Googling it. I'm like, you can find out more. Happened to be a training the next week in California. I'm like, I can remember sitting in my office and saying to my wife, "Is there anything critical next week?" And I was like, "I gotta be there. Like this is." And immediately I thought about it. It's like not only does it focus on yourself, you get some awareness
Yes.
about yourself, but you're understanding other person. So it was immediate, like, this is emotional intelligence. This is the thing that I had struggled with for decades with
Mhm.
helping executives and leaders and students develop. Because the biggest criticism I always had from employers and industry was, can't you just teach these people coming out of your programs, whether they were short executive programs to,
Yeah.
degree, master's degree, MBA, exec ed, whatever, to communicate, to
Yeah.
lead others, to manage conflict, to work well in teams. It was the soft skills, but it's really the human skills. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I've got to learn more about this. So that's how I
Yeah.
backed into it. And since that time, I've had the opportunity to introduce it to several dozen college communities, using it
Fantastic.
with developing people, including nurses, in medical assistants, dental hygienists, rad techs, medical lab technicians. I'm doing some pilots with a medical school in the dental area, and how does it
Wow.
impact patient anxiety and even the confidence of dentists in their fourth
Yep.
year and things like that. So there's a lot of other applications that I'm excited to explore,
Hmm.
beyond, again, the sales context, because everything we do is selling. That's the
Yes.
bottom line, wherever you are. And make no mistake, if you're trying to communicate, I've got two amazing daughters, and I can remember growing up, like, getting them to clean their room, like, that's a sales job sometimes, like, or influencing my wife to go to a certain restaurant or whatever it is, or my boss, like, I got a proposal, or I want to do this or that. I'm
Yes.
selling an idea or a concept, and
Mhm.
getting the buy-in. If you're leading a change effort, it
Mhm.
is about selling. It's about
Yes.
influencing. It's about educating people and helping them understand the benefit of whatever it is. So that's how I got into it. And I'm like, okay, this was designed for sales. At the time, I was actually on the board for a local chamber, and so
Mhm.
I started working with a couple businesses locally, just small businesses.
Yeah.
One individual, and I was doing some strategic planning with her, and she had a 10-year exit plan, figuring out, like, this is, I need to build my business up to this point to be able to sell it, and then I want
Okay.
to retire and buy a ranch and do this other volunteer work in another country and set up some charity foundations and stuff. And I'm like, let's try this. Like, was designed for sales. And this
Yeah.
was, a particular person was an accountant. She had an accounting firm and bookkeepers and stuff. And I'm like, let's try it. And I had actually, at some universities in the past, developed a master's in accounting program. And I worked with accountants. I know a lot of them, not to
Yeah.
generalize, but a lot of them can't sell their way out of a paper bag. They like they like doing the books and sitting behind the computer, and their
Yes.
softer human
Have your
skills,
comfort zone. Yep. Mhm.
there's a comfort zone there. So anyway, so I'm like, okay, and this person was the rainmaker for her company, bringing
Okay.
in new clients, and she was bringing in 1 to 2 new clients basically a month.
Mm.
And we implemented the system with her, the bank system, and within a very short period of time, she was going from 1 to 2 and a conversion rate of 20-25% to close to 80% conversion rates on
Love it.
everybody she was bringing in, to the point where she was getting not 1 or 2 a month, she was getting 8 or 9 new clients a month, and actually had to stop doing her marketing because she was like, I can't hire enough people to handle these new clients. And
Yeah.
actually, what was cool was her 10-year plan became a 3-year plan, and she since has sold for the multiple that she wanted on her business, and
Oh
has her ranch
man.
now, living the life that she imagined. So that's the type
Wow.
of impact that it had. And then when I started seeing that type of effect on conversion rates consistently, it's like, there's something here. Like, there's no question about it. And it just makes
Mhm.
sense when you think about, I learned the golden rule, treat others how you want to be treated, but they're
Yep.
not me. And I was a manager at UPS many years ago, and I learned that lesson the hard way. I was recognizing an employee
Yeah.
who, didn't really want the public recognition. I thought he would enjoy that, but I
Yeah.
found he didn't. In fact, it upset him, and so it's like,
Oh,
oh, I hadn't thought about that. And that's
yeah.
when I discovered really this idea of the platinum rule: treat others how they want to be treated. And that's what the best leaders and managers do. And when I used to teach management principles, there's Mary Kay, or
Mhm.
Mary Parker Follett,
Mhm.
who was one of the original gurus in management, back in the 1800s. She was more
Yeah.
like, precursor. And she said, management is the art of getting things done through other people. And
Mhm.
so ultimately, whatever you do, wherever you go, if you're trying to get something done through somebody
Yep.
else, you're in sales, you're a manager, to be a great leader, you're doing those types of things. I know that was a little probably a longer answer, but that sort of
No,
wraps it together. And since then, I've just
yeah.
explored different applications and really focusing on developing people's awareness of themselves. Emotional intelligence, obviously, is one of those
Hmm.
groundbreaking, shattering concepts, even the Harvard Business Review talks about, of
Yeah.
this century. And, Goldman popularized it. But if you go back
Hmm.
to Mayer and Salovey in terms of the work that they did around this, we know it does correlate. You talked about stress earlier and
Yep.
things like that. Direct correlation. People who
Yeah.
have higher emotional intelligence earn more. They have less stress. They're more happy and fulfilled in all aspects of
Mm.
their life. There's so much thousands of
Incredible.
studies have been done now because this, a couple decades of this concept being around. And Bank is a
Hmm.
tool that can actually help people do that quickly. And
Hmm.
unlike a lot of other systems, it was designed to do the not just the intrapersonal view, but the interpersonal view, looking at, do
Yes.
you understand other people and can you relate to them
Right.
well? The social skills, right?
Yep. I love that. I love everything you shared there and so many key points. I want to just hit on one, and this might have been from this section or the one before, but thinking about, for me as a nurse, once I really dove into the bank methodology, I began to think about all different types of communication. So, I mean, I can think about
Mm-hmm.
nursing culture and how toxic
Sure.
that can be, but also if I think about our patient education programs, we educate,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nothing new has happened, like you said, in therapeutic communication, nothing has happened for decades, right? We
Right.
clarify, we it's that they're doing these age-old techniques without any idea of who is the person sitting in front of us, without any understanding of who they are, how they think, how they receive information, what they
Exactly.
value most. That is not in our thinking. And so when I started understanding, I mean, the light bulb started going off for me that not only can I communicate with the nurse in front of me differently, I can and
Mm-hmm.
should communicate with the patient in front of me differently. And each
Absolutely.
one of them based on their unique values and characteristics wants that information in a different way. And I
Mm-hmm.
love the idea, nurse managers have come to me and said, Teresa, how many times do I have to teach this as a mandatory staff meeting? They're just not getting it. I've taught it 6 months in a row. My first question now is, what voice are you teaching it in? How are
Right.
what personality are you showing up in? If you don't have a message that reaches all people, no wonder they're bored to tears. No wonder they're not,
Exactly.
the action personality, right? Isn't that the ants in the pants person in the meeting? I can't
Yeah.
be here. I can't sit
Absolutely.
still. I got to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Just get to it. Right. And for me, the other key thing, I'll just mention this before we go on, was that I had also experimented with a ton of personality assessments before, and they were
Mm-hmm.
meaningless to me because they were not actionable. There was
Yes.
nothing
That's
given to me from that personality assessment that showed me next steps I could take that would be meaningful. It was just, now I
Mm-hmm.
know this information and nothing. You fall off
Yeah.
the planet at that point. But with
Exactly.
bank, I love that when my new prospective client or my new client or my family member cracks their code, I
Mm-hmm.
get an immediate report that says, here's how you can show up best for this person. And
Yeah.
that just fosters our emotional intelligence, doesn't it? Every time I review those reports, I learn more, I internalize more, and I can
Mhm.
come to the table as a better version of me for that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. And you really nailed it because I have used, like you, many different systems over the years to help people with the intent of helping them work better. And whether you posted like, their personality code, whatever system you were using on
mhm,
their door or their desk or tried to remember it, it was
yep.
typically a one and done. You're trying to build a team and then they go back and it's like, oh, what do I need to do? That person is, uh, INTJ or
Right.
what it is. And then the other part of what I love about this system is it also approaches people with a growth mindset, with the idea being it's actually you're not an introvert or you're extrovert or you're this or that. There's no judgment.
Yeah.
And the goal is actually to help you, to your point, understand who it is and how do you need to change how you're communicating with them based on who they are and what's important to them. And so having had thousands of faculty work for me over the years, and, deans and others, helping them become more effective in the classroom. And, it used to be sort of the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. It's the same thing in training, but
Yeah.
how you do that, knowing that actually each of these different personality preferences are tied to learning styles
Yeah.
and how you can actually approach the learning. So training faculty and doing that was really powerful. And we saw the improvements in learning and even the student feedback about the faculty, or, the equivalent in the training environment,
Yeah.
about how well the training was received and the approachability of the trainer or the faculty member and things like that, and the trust and rapport and the inclusive community or the psychological safety that they
Hmm.
provided in that environment. So that's what I love, is the simplicity and the ease of application. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because that really
Hey.
differentiates it. And again, this idea of really understanding that personality isn't permanent. It's something that changes as well. And you can choose, you have a decision to make. And Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there's a choice. And it's the
Hmm.
same thing. You walk out of a room and somebody, just, you whether it's an emergency room or something else, something traumatic where you've lost a
Hmm.
life, or there's a code and you got to then move into the next room and be like smiley and cheerily. Like, how do you do that? And how do you regulate your own emotions quickly and recognize who it is so you can meet them where they're at?
Hmm. I love that. I love that. It's such a valuable tool. I cannot even hardly remember what it was like to communicate without bank.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that at this point. I'm so grateful for that. So tell me, we mentioned earlier how when people first started using the bank methodology, all of a sudden they discovered what I consider as nurse side effects, right? Here's these, because I'm using
Yeah.
this for this one purpose. Oh my goodness. All of a sudden I notice I've got all these other wonderful things that are happening in my life. Has there been anything like that that you've noticed since you implemented the bank methodology?
Well, I mean, obviously, probably the earliest, similar to you, and moving into doing some of the consulting work that I did, I accelerated obviously my effectiveness in being
Sure.
able to put together proposals, deliver presentations, connect. And it was shortly after that, one of the training that I flew out to California for.
Hmm.
I had my investment paid multiple times over, because I had a contract, multiple 5-digit proposal that
Oh,
was
wow.
accepted. It came down to it. After I was involved with the contract, I asked the CEO and I said, "What, I know there was a lot of different proposals they had and people presenting and whatnot. What led them to choose me?" And
Mhm.
unanimously, and it was a thing where there was the C-suite that I was presenting to, and
Sure.
what they said was that everybody really felt like I knew what they were looking for and that I really listened. And I
Oh,
didn't come
man.
in with a prescribed, like, this is what,
Yeah,
you
this
need
is
to
my
do.
pitch.
Like, this is
Yeah.
my pitch. This is what I have. And
Mhm.
it was really understanding them. And I was like, oh my, that's bank. And actually I can remember. So not only with the tools, but one of the things with the training that I was exposed to was not just using the link to get the reports, but there's cards you can use. There's something called speed coding, which is training so you identify people and understand who they are. And so I had speed coded the executive team basically as I was talking to them, and was very aware when I talked to the CFO or the CEO or the chief marketing officer or the
Mm.
VP of HR, like, this is what I need to do, and this is how I can connect with them. Even though everyone was there, I had some individual meetings, but
Mhm.
really the main session was a proposal with all of them there. Like, how do
Mhm.
you do that? So how do you do that when you're teaching and educating patients, right?
Mhm.
If you've got something
Mhm.
that you're involved with, you got to balance that out so you're connecting with everybody in the training room or in the
Right.
classroom or in the
Mhm.
boardroom in that case. So saw that. And then of
Fantastic.
course, so many light bulbs went off for me in terms of the dynamics, even just growing up and understanding, why there was the dynamic between my mom and dad or my grandmother or things like that. And
Yeah.
understanding, other dynamics with friends and family. And yeah, it became predictable. And then
Mhm.
even as I was working doing leadership development, the ability to very quickly, people are like, I would come in, and before I would come in and do something, I'd have everybody get those types of reports. And I'd look at it and say, oh, there's probably something going on here. In my mind, I'm thinking that. And so I'd
Mhm.
explore that in conversation with the director or leader or CEO and say, wondering how are things going here or in this department or over here? And
Mhm.
they're like, it's interesting you ask because we actually have a major challenge there. And they're like, do you have a crystal ball? Like, did someone tell you something? Like, I'm like, I sort of do have a crystal ball, and it's this personality thing because it's predictable. And
Yes.
so that's where I think helping people understand it's not personal, it's just personality has been a game changer in so many aspects of
Mhm.
my own life in
Mhm.
terms of
Same.
understanding and having patience for things that are going on. So I think
Mhm.
I just like you were sharing, I mean, countless stories of relationships that are changed, marriages, people intervening based on
Mhm.
understanding their child, and making sure they're parenting the child they have, not the child they wish they had, but really being
Mhm.
able to connect. And
Mhm.
near and dear to my heart, a number of stories as an educator, seeing what had been maybe a fixed mindset of an individual, whether they're a child or an adult, didn't matter, but helping them understand that they have the ability. We have neuroplasticity, and we can actually rewire our brain and
Yes.
put behind some of those limiting beliefs that may have been holding us back. And so much of that may have been shaped by other personality types. And we
Mhm.
may have, become somebody that we're not really meant to be based on our
Mhm.
profession or occupation or messages and things that we heard, and really being true and rediscovering sort of their authentic self and helping people do that. So that's been really fun.
I love that. I love that. And I would also add, there are some people that I've talked to about the bank methodology who have said, when we talk about how you speed coded the room as you were presenting to the C-suite, or how, just knowing the bank codes can really increase our influence in those conversations. Well, isn't that manipulation? And what I would say to that is, in my opinion, I'm giving the person in front of me what they need in the most efficient way so that they can
Mm-hmm.
choose to say yes or no. They still say yes, they
Absolutely.
still say no, it still comes from them.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, when I have a process that is easier, faster, and better, that checks all the boxes for me as a nurse and as an entrepreneur. That is always what I'm after, is easier, faster, better. And for me, the bank methodology is just there, and it hits all of those things. So again, it's not about manipulation. It's about giving the right information and in the
Mm-hmm.
right way to each person
Exactly.
in front of you. And one of the things that I noticed happened for me when I started using the bank system, Eric, is that, I have a lot of content out there on social media, on YouTube and other platforms. I do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
video marketing, and
Yeah.
people started booking appointments with me through my funnel. And I went from having, I was able to decrease the sales cycle. Instead of having
Yes.
to have seven, contacts with someone, I
Mm-hmm.
was able to close many on the first contact and some on the second, so it just
Yeah.
dramatically increased my income by
Right.
and served my clients at a higher level, got them to their goals sooner by working
Mm-hmm.
with me. And so it's all good. It's a win-win-win.
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
like the story I shared, with the accountant. I mean, seeing that time and time again, and that was one of the probably best parts for a number of my clients was the savings and time, because
Yes.
time is money, or it's freedom, to be able to
Mhm.
go out and do other things that you want to be doing and not being stuck in the daily grind. So to be
Mhm.
more efficient and effective and better, faster, quicker is really a game changer, and it is honoring the other person. So I would agree with you completely about, it's not manipulation when your intent is to serve somebody in an authentic, genuine way, an honest, transparent way, where
Mhm.
you're cutting to the chase and you're communicating
Yes.
with them with the information that they need to make an informed decision
Right.
rather than delivering something or sharing something that's irrelevant to them, that isn't going to, they really don't care about.
Yep.
And that's what causes people to check out. And leaders and organizations do it all the time. When you look at the Gallup
Yes.
Institute and the studies they have done around the disengagement of workers and
Yeah.
employees in organizations, I believe that's a big part of it is what are you communicating, and not communicating it in a way that's actually resonating or engaging your employees, right?
Yep.
And connect with who they are and what's important to them.
Yeah.
Do they feel honored and valued and respected at work? And if
Mm-hmm.
people aren't listening and they're
Yep.
just telling people this is what you got to do, it's got the opposite impact, of course.
Yeah.
So
And I think,
yeah.
would you agree? I think that the biggest error that any of us can make in the field of sales or attempting to communicate with influence when we're not using the bank methodology is that we typically only present in one way, and that is based on our own primary personality code. I will drown you in details because I'm a blueprint personality.
Yeah.
And so I want to teach you and share with you everything that I would need to know to feel
Mm-hmm.
comfortable buying that product or investing in that service, whatever. And so we are our own worst enemy in doing that. And when we understand the person in front of us, we can, what do they say? Cater your presentation to the person in front of you. It can't
Yeah.
be a one size fits all.
Exactly. And that is, to be able to have influence, it is about understanding what's going to motivate that person, what information they need, and serving them in a way that fits. Because I can think back in my own career, even though I was a dean at a very young age, working with, a campus president or other people, or in other situations where you're working with leaders, where you've got
Mm-hmm.
maybe a CEO who's very much about the executive summary, give me the bullet points and everything else, and I'm high knowledge, and so I want to share all this information with them. It's like they don't get, like, give me the bottom line, give me the cliff note version, right? So just understanding that, it was a game changer in my own life, and obviously refined it even further, understanding the bank methodology and the
Mm-hmm.
power of language and words, and that's something that I was fascinated with many, many years ago, and studied a field of neuro-linguistic programming. I'm a master
Mm-hmm.
practitioner in that area. And that makes distinctions based on types of language, typically with representational systems, but this actually ties it to values, which is
Mm-hmm.
really powerful when you start layering that into how we experience the world and how quickly language can impact our effectiveness. To your point, who are you talking to, and are you speaking the same language as that person? If you think about it, almost as if each of these different personality types speak a different language. I remember reading the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and talked
Mm-hmm.
about the gender differences in communication. So this actually is another layer of that, and you can add
Exactly.
in like love languages or a lot of other things to supercharge your effectiveness in your relationships. So it's
Absolutely.
always, yeah.
Love that. Love that. Oh man, so many excellent points that we've been able to cover today. Eric, I want to thank you again for being my guest here on Igniting Impact, Influence, and Income. And right now, what I'd love to do is just give you the next 2 or 3 minutes to share with our audience how they can connect with you. I know you have a lot of coaching programs and different things going on, but how can our
Sure.
audience reach out to you for additional support or to learn more about you?
Well, I appreciate that. There's a couple of things. Of course, probably the easiest way to reach out to me is just via email. I'd love to hear from you if there's something that I might be able to assist you with. Eric@meridiansuccessgroup.com, and it's posted below. The other thing is I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a regular newsletter that I do called Confidence in Leadership to help really people develop those strengths around that and how to transform their life, how to really overcome some of the challenges that leaders typically face. And I'm actually have a number of other things that people can connect with me on. A discovery call, we'll post the link to book that as well. The one thing that I do want to share with your group here
Yeah.
is the opportunity to really accelerate their success and get clarity around what they're doing in life with powerful tools and techniques. I do that through coaching. I want to make them aware in July, in August, September, every month I have a 5-day challenge event where I help people gain clarity around really what it is that is their calling, their purpose, that intersection where they can do what they're passionate about, what they love, what energizes them, and
Mm.
understand maybe some of the limiting beliefs or frustrations or negative self-talk, things that may have held them back, to craft a plan to really create the life that they imagine. And so it's a really powerful, quick approach versus some of the 90-day. I typically do most of my coaching programs are a 12-week program, because then people can really get traction in a variety of areas. I have a 90-day Kickstarter program. I have one to help people create their future self now, unleash their inner power, help people really look at their life by design. So the best thing is connecting and really understanding how I could support you with things like that. And as I shared before, of course, if there's organizational opportunities to work, I do a lot of custom programs with organizations, designing something that will add value to create a high performing organizational culture. And you obviously are an amazing resource in terms of bank as well. And I translate that into a variety of different industries in the work that I'm doing. But it's really LinkedIn, email. Would love to have people follow my newsletter
Awesome.
and connect to see how I might be able to serve and support you. Ultimately, this idea of selling is service. And I want to leave you with that, because people do business with who they know, like, and trust. And your ability to adapt and a willingness to learn from both successes and failures, and to continuously educate yourself about what's possible, because we don't know what we don't know. And this is one of those methodologies that is so powerful that you need to learn about it. And I bring other similar best practices and strategies to anybody that I work with to help them reduce the learning curve and
Yes.
accelerate their success. Because like you said, it's about closing faster.
Mhm.
So again, I would love to connect and help support you in any way I can.
Oh my goodness.
One last thing, actually, I'm going to
Yeah.
throw in there for
Okay.
this group, because I'm so passionate about healthcare. I love what, obviously, two areas that we have an opportunity to have a big impact is education and healthcare, because we're changing lives, we're saving lives. Anybody who is interested in one of the coaching programs, I'm going to offer a 50% discount. I just feel like it's the right thing to do to people that are out on the front lines that are helping. I'm so grateful to some of the nurses that saved my mother's life, literally, and the care and feeding. And I love what your mission is as well. So I
Oh,
want to
thank
offer that
you.
to your community. So
Oh my gosh, what an amazing, amazing thing. Thank you so much,
you're welcome.
Eric, for not only being my guest and my dear friend, but also for sharing this amazing opportunity with our audience. Nurse entrepreneurs, all of my nursing peeps, if this is something you're interested in learning about, I encourage you to take advantage of what Eric is offering here. Connect with him via email or book a discovery call, whatever it is that may be helpful to you to take your next step in the world. And, together the bank community, the one thing I love about it is that it is truly a strong, supportive community. So thank you again, Eric, for being my guest.
Thank
And
you.
I want to thank all of our viewers for being here. And this concludes our episode today. We will see you next time for another episode of Igniting Impact, Influence, and Income. Bye for now.
Thank you.